This video is geared more toward those of you that might be interested in working for your local media, maybe breaking into that local paper or website. So I thought what I'd do is just kind of review with you what I did last night at a local high school basketball game. So while I no longer shoot a lot of major sporting events, I do have a relationship with a local community paper here in the suburbs where I live. And the sports editor will call me periodically to cover a game. So I thought I would just kind of run through that. And for some of you who are wondering when I finally have that opportunity to go do that, if that's your desire, what is it what do I do? What do I cover? What do I shoot? How do I approach it? And I thought maybe this might be in some way helpful or instructional for those of you that are interested in doing that. So the first thing is that if you've been pestering your local paper, news outlet, sports website, whatever it is that you're trying to do, if you've been pestering that person to give you a shot, be ready, okay? I think I had mentioned maybe in my class or something, have your gear, your equipment in mission ready state all the time. When that phone call or text comes in from that sports editor, it's typically, if it's your first shot, it's going to be something like this. Hey, my regular guy just called in. He's got the flu. He can't cover the game tonight. Can you run over to Smith High School and shoot the basketball game? It's in 2 hours. So the correct answer is yes. First of all, your gear should be ready to go. So I want to give you some insight into my experience and what, if you want to impress that person and get another shot, these are maybe some of the things you should do. This particular video is geared toward basketball, specifically high school basketball, but it's really, it applies to just about any sport. The concepts and the principles are kind of the same, the things that you want to look for. So this particular sports editor knows me, he knows my history, he knows that when he sends me out somewhere that I'm going to probably give him what he's looking for, just based on my experience. And he's also very good about letting me know what he wants if there's something out of the ordinary. So in this case, he gave me a heads up. This was just a boys game only, which was good to know. And then that he only wanted the home team. He was not interested in any coverage on the other team, so that was also very helpful to know. So if you get that call or you are going to go cover something for somebody, I think those are some of the basic things that you want to know. In addition, if that editor hasn't given you specific instructions, maybe ask if there's an additional storyline that you should be aware of. So obviously you want to tell the story of who won the game and who played, who scored the points, and that's all well and good. But every once in a while, there's another storyline that's going on that would be really helpful for you to know. Just as an example, I think it was a year or two ago, maybe longer ago, there was a local coach that was recovering from some cancer treatments, and it was her first night back after having been away on medical leave. Knowing that going into the game was very helpful in triggering me to make sure I got some additional photos of her coaching that maybe I wouldn't have ordinarily done. So I was able to give her a little bit more attention than normal. So those are things that would be really helpful in going into it. So one of the things I talk about in my course, and that I think I've mentioned on at least one of the videos on this channel, was that you have to understand when you're going into an event who you're shooting for. And so if you're all of a sudden in that position where there's a local paper or website that's relying on you for content, you're no longer shooting for yourself. You are trying to provide for their needs, and when you're shooting for media, they have different needs than you might have. So you'll want to give them a variety of looks. So you want to send some that are horizontal or landscape orientation, some that are portrait or vertical orientation. So you'll want to mix that up a little bit, as well as providing some wide angle versus some real tight shots. So it's important to just kind of give a variety of different things. In addition to that, if there are players that are particularly high scoring in a game, or maybe they're just well known in the league. You might also want to consider providing what are called ISO shots or court portraits, that sort of thing, where it's just them alone on the court, whether they're dribbling the ball or just standing there or waiting to take a foul shot. It's always good form to just maybe some of the marquee players, just to have some of those feature story type photographs of them. But you definitely want to be aware during the game of who the top scorers are. When you're shooting a college or pro basketball game, that information is fairly easy to get. It's usually up on the scoreboard, and as the players trade places as being the top three scorers, and their information will change. It's very easy to keep track of that. At a high school basketball game, it's really tough. So there's a couple ways you can do that. If you're not familiar with the teams, just listen to the announcer, and you'll start to hear the same names over and over again. And so then it's up to you to kind of, if you can get a roster, that's great. If not, then you need to equate the name with the jersey number of the person who just scored. But another thing you can do is at halftime you can walk over to the scorer's table and just kind of get an idea who's scored what, and then who are emerging as the top scorers in the game. But at the end of the game, you want to make sure that you have photos of probably at least the top three scorers in the game, and to the extent possible, a vertical and a horizontal. But it's at the very least, you definitely want to try to have the top performers in that game, as well as a coach picture. Again, you're probably not going to be required to submit that many photos, but it's better to oversubmit than undersubmit. And even though local papers don't run a lot of coach pictures, it will definitely show good form for you to do that. Another thing to keep in mind is maybe just one or two shots of the players away from the basket. Maybe they're on the bench, or they're coming out of the game or going into the game. Sometimes when they're waiting in front of the scorer's table to go in. There's all kinds of different opportunities that you can just maybe include one sort of away from the action shot. Another thing, just periodically, if you start to work with somebody on a regular basis, just maybe ask them now and then if they need any stock photos. These are photos that maybe aren't pertinent to the particular game, but when they run a feature story, they might want to reach in and grab another different version of that player's portfolio and just have another picture available. So never hurts to ask. Another thing, too, to keep in mind, that if you're there covering for a paper or somebody, and they've got a writer, just ask if the writer is going to be at the game, and introduce yourself. Let them know you're there, and there may be an emerging storyline there that they want a picture of, and that's happened to me. They'll say, "Oh man, I'm glad you introduced yourself. Here's this. I just found this out. Can you get a picture of so and so?" So it's really important to connect with the writer so that you've got that complete story if something emerges. And there's one last thing I want to mention here too. You've noticed in these wide angle shots, they look like they're shot really low to the ground, which kind of gives a neat effect. So I thought I'd tell you how I did that. It's not magic or anything like that. So I use a piece of packing for a camera case. You can use a piece of foam rubber or just about anything. It's just find something that's of the right height, around 2 inches, 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches, where you can just kind of set your camera on the floor and just with a 24-70 lens, just kind of have it tipped up, maybe at maybe a 25 or 30 degree angle. And then pre-focus in autofocus, focus on a point in the paint that's maybe under the basket, or maybe 2 or 3 feet out from under the basket. Pre-focus on that, and then switch your lens into manual so that it's not focusing anymore, and it'll be focused on that point. Open your aperture up a little bit, get a little bit better depth of field, maybe a 3.2 or 3.5, and then you'll have to fiddle with the zoom and decide what setting you need to be at. I think I was shooting at around 30 or 32 millimeters, whatever. But it's kind of a cool effect. So you set it on the floor, and then when they go into the paint and they're going up for a shot or wherever, you just reach down and press the shutter release, and it'll take the picture. It's already in focus, so all you're doing is just pressing the button at the right time. So it's kind of a neat effect. You don't want to overuse it, but it's kind of cool. So anyways, I hope this was helpful. It probably doesn't apply to everybody. Some of you are not really looking to break into the local media, but if you are, there's some little tips and information about how to respond to that first opportunity, or the maybe continuing opportunities that you might get to please that editor that's kind of putting his or her faith in you to go and help them out. So anyways, good luck out there, and I'll see you in the next lecture.